All right, boys, it's game day. Let's go. Let's go. Big game. Got a big game today. My package has arrived. Oh, sweet. Nice. Score! Great win, fellas. What game's next? G-men are having a great year. Let's go blue! Here we go. Prime time football. Texans, Dolphins. Let's do this. Yes! Review. Yes! Yes!
Heartland Flags. Every sport, every team, every flag.
Every team?
That's right.
Fine. I'll get a Washington flag too.
Find your flag and so much more with fast, free shipping. Heartlandflags.com. Every sport, every team, every flag. Almost.
Lloyd.
Success in farming is all about precision and efficiency, ensuring every seed, every drop of water, every nutrient and treatment counts. Terraplex Ag is helping farmers all over Iowa and the Midwest do just that. With precision ag-grown technology and support from Terraplex, you'll boost your productivity and make timely and informed decisions, all while reducing your costs and increasing your profit. It's time to revolutionize your farming. Harvest the benefits with Terraplex Ag. Visit TerraplexAg.com.
Heartland Flags and Gifts presents Legends and Listeners with Scott Dochterman and Chad Leistikow. Fly 'em high and fly 'em proud. Find your flag at heartlandflags.com. Breaking down the Big Ten from the Channel Seed Studios, this is Iowa Everywhere.
Hey, Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, and Iowans everywhere. Welcome into the Channel Seed Studios for episode 19 of Legends and Listeners. I guess episode 20 is going to come from Orlando. Here on the Iowa Everywhere Network, the voice you're hearing now is that of Chad Leistikow, a longtime sports columnist for the Des Moines Register. And the voice you're about to hear on this Christmas week is that of Scott Dochterman of The Athletic. We both report about, write about, talk about the Hawkeyes for a living. And Scott, even though we had National Signing Day just 24 hours ago and the Citrus Bowl just 11 days away, I don't think there's much doubt where we need to center our discussion today, and that is on the search for Kirk Ferentz's next offensive coordinator, because this will shape everything we write about for the next 8 months.
Yeah, good morning, Chad. And I think it's amazing, isn't it, that this team is going for its 11th win, which has only happened, 3 other times in school history. And they just wrapped up a pretty good class, and there's still some prospects waiting out there in the portal, both internally and externally. And yet it kind of centers on to what's next in this offensive coordinator situation. And I would say that it was clearly cloudy on Monday, and it got stormy yesterday regarding Kirk Ferentz. And I think some of his ambiguous comments on Monday kind of came back, and he tried to clarify them, but he was more or less angry and lashing out. And I think this was a situation where you need to really look more internally with some of the comments that he made. And I think we can kind of go over them, but certainly, we're 11 days away from the game, and probably another 13 or 14 away from finding out who's going to be leading the offense for the next year or two.
Yeah, well, definitely we'll dive into that momentarily. About 4 days until Christmas, even though 11 to the new year. Still time to visit our title sponsor for Legends and Listeners. Thanks, as always, to Heartland Flags and Gifts. Gifts are in the title. So if you need a last-minute idea, Heartland Flags and Gifts offer free shipping anywhere in the U.S. and always has fresh products, nearly every sport, every team, every flag. Visit our good friends online at heartlandflags.com or in-store. You may have to get in-store soon, 3719 Southwest 9th Street in Des Moines. Scott, you mentioned Kirk Ferentz's comments on Monday. Honestly, we haven't had a lot of pre-show prep time together. I've been typing my fingers off trying to get ready for the holidays here, and I know you've had other stuff going on as well. So what stood out to you? I'm curious, what stood out to you with what Kirk Ferentz said Monday. You phrased it as lashing out. And I had some thoughts on that too, but I'm curious where you're coming from.
There was a couple of different angles, I think, on Monday that were interesting. And he kind of threw out there. It was kind of an ambiguous fashion. And we really didn't get a chance to have a, okay, what did you mean by that kind of response or retort? But he said he had 3 phone calls and he has a 4th lined up later this week. And then yesterday he clarified that he hadn't talked to 3 different people and that it was just 3 phone calls. And I think that's something that he needed to kind of address at the outset, and whether it was our fault for not following up. But, again, we didn't have a lot of opportunities to follow up. But I think that by volunteering that information, he needed to be more clear. And that is, when people hear 3 phone calls and another lined up, what do you think? You're talking to 3 different people and you're adding a 4th. He's saying 3 conversations, 3 phone calls. Is it the same person now, or are they the different people? Or are you just mocking it and saying, well, I've just had 3 phone calls, like, hey, how you doing? Oh, what do you think? I don't know what he was trying to accomplish by what he said there at the outset. And I thought yesterday he almost appeared angry. He dressed it before everything else. And I didn't understand that approach either, because all you're doing is leading to speculation. And I think people took it as such, and then it was misconstrued from what he wanted to accomplish.
Lots to unpack here. And then he also was upset about how people took his comments about another Big Ten team that came in with big offensive stats.
Yeah.
Said he wasn't talking about a sitting coach. And then he still didn't clarify who he was talking about, other than saying, I was thinking about an offensive coordinator, but who knows?
Yeah.
I guess just to kind of clear that part up, I wrote in my column that day that it seemed he was alluding to Nebraska and Scott to me, because he's talking about wins per game, and Scott Frost's wins per game, aka winning percentage, was 16 and 31, so 16 and 47, whatever that winning percentage is, just barely over 333 at Nebraska. So that that was what I said. It seemed, I didn't say definitely, but it seemed like. And then, but if you're gonna, I guess my point on that one, because I want to get to the other stuff too, but my point on that one is like, he was clearly talking about USC in his follow-up comments.
Yeah, no question.
Ronnie Lott reference. But, if you're going to make kind of a veiled slight, I mean, I know that's the way he's talking, and I don't want him to stop, but you can't be mad if you're not going to specify.
Yeah.
Like, oh, who are you talking? Yeah. And plus, that's not like, we're not, I don't know, like I wouldn't have said like, well, who are you talking about specifically? Unless I was in a one-on-one conversation, So anyway, I don't really feel like he should have been mad at that because he left that door wide open. And it really seems, I still think he was talking about Nebraska, even though maybe he's trying to soften it, I think.
Yeah.
And by getting mad at us when he's the one that brought up the veiled comment. I mean, it's clearly about Nebraska. I can't imagine who else it would be.
Well, if you're trying to bring up something from 10 years ago, that's just shame on you. I mean, your players were preteens. And then you're trying to, then now we're playing the guessing game of, okay, well, which coach are you talking about at what institution? Well, Pat Fitzgerald was at Northwestern for a while. You're not going to talk that way about Wisconsin. PJ's been in place. He didn't really have, and then you're going east and it's like, well, all right, where are we going here? You can't talk about Jeff Brom because he has a better winning percentage against you. So that really only leaves one person, and then if you're trying to get into this, well, is it Josh Gaddis at Michigan? Well, they beat you too. They beat you 4 straight times. It just doesn't make any sense. So I don't know why he did that. I don't know why he went there, and so, to get it misconstrued and you need to require clarification, you probably either A, need to not say it, or B, be more direct. Because if you're going to apply shade, you better apply it in the right direction, because otherwise people are going to look at it in a different way.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Good comment. We'll leave that part there, but let's get to the offensive coordinator stuff. And I guess I'm curious what you think here, Scott, because my reporting indicates, and I wrote this, that he was telling the truth the other day about three candidates and a fourth to come. I mean, alluding to that, I guess. And so I think my opinion is he was kind of almost protecting the process a little bit. Like he may have a guy in mind, but is going to talk to another guy type of thing. I don't know. I just felt like, again, if you're going to clarify yourself, just clarify. Yeah. Like I've talked to two candidates or whatever. But I just thought it was just weird. And then I don't know. I just feel like I don't feel like my reporting's off the mark. And so I don't feel like what he said the other day was off the mark. And he even like kind of dropped that in there. Like, I'll give you this little tidbit. Yeah. You know, he kind of prefaced it by saying, "I'll give you this little," whatever he said.
Yeah. It was like, we'll give you this little tidbit on, we'll have another conversation later this week, and again, when you're not when you need to clarify yourself in that regard, you can't really be too upset when people run with it in certain ways. And whether it's 3 or 4 candidates legitimately, or or he's trying to keep the speculation down. I almost think that it doesn't make sense to lash out at all. Let the speculation run wild. It doesn't matter. I mean, the speculation that ran wild last week with Scott Frost was laughable. There's no way in God's green earth that he's going to hire Scott Frost. It just, for some reasons we won't mention, but let's just say stylistically, it just wouldn't fit. Make it easy. Okay, that's the time to lash out. That's the time to make fun of people. Not that when you trip over your words aren't clear enough, and then people take it and whether they're right or wrong, to try to say it. But I think what's most interesting, Chad, is even more than Kirk trying to clarify his missteps is who are the guys? Who are the people that should be in this position or considered for this position? And, and he answered questions regarding Joe Philbin and Paul Chryst, who I think we've all kind of known about and discussed. And I thought his responses were pretty much on target for what he normally would say on something like that. But how did you take his responses?
Yeah, I mean, I think those two guys are in the final group here. And I would say finalists. I think they're definitely in the mix. I think I'm 100% sure that, any reporting last week that Joe Philbin was going to be the guy to be offered the job is incorrect. Yeah. I feel very confident about that based on my reporting. But I think it could be Paul Chryst, it could be Joe Philbin, but I also don't. I'm also confident that those aren't the only two names in the mix. I think Kirk Ferentz is very good at keeping some stuff under wraps, and there's probably at least one other candidate out there that we don't know about that we may never know about, but and I think that's probably the one phone call he was going to make this week. So I like, we talked about Paul Chryst last week. I would rank him personally ahead of Joe Philbin, and that's nothing against Joe Philbin. I think he, has had a fine established career, but I feel like for all the reasons we talked about last week, and if you missed our show, go ahead and review that. I feel like the Paul Chryst thing makes a ton of sense, and in fact, I feel like he even, if you're trying to read into Kirk Ferentz's comments, I felt like his endorsement of Chryst was almost stronger yet more compact, as if he was not trying to say too much there. That was my view.
I agree with you. And looking at it, reading it, and then listening to it again, because voice inflection is always important when you're answering questions like that. He has a history with Joe Philbin that goes back 25 plus years, when he brought him in, and obviously he's had a successful career. And I know some people have poo-pooed his lack of play calling or whatever. Well, you're involved in the play design, and let's face it, when you're with Aaron Rodgers that long, the quarterback has the opportunity to overrule your play call anyway, based on what they see. So I'm not as anti Joe Philbin because he hasn't played, called plays. Like that's the marker between being a good candidate and a bad candidate. But I do agree with you that what he said about Paul Christ was a little bit stronger, and it makes more sense. And I am there with you. Now, I don't think I would poo-poo, to use the same word twice in one show is probably a bad thing, but Joe Philbin. But I do like what Paul Christ brings. I do think that, he has been a dedicated play caller. That is for sure. And he's been successful at it. And the numbers you brought up last week identify his strengths in a lot of ways. And he's done it at the collegiate level exclusively. And he's done it at a program that is the sister program of Iowa. And, Kirk even brought up that, and he's mentioned it, and I think that's really respectful, that Wisconsin is the measurement Iowa has had all these years, whether it's been in the West Division or even before that you look at that program and think it's a program you need to be, that's your target program. And Paul has been a major, major part of that. And it's the reason why you went cash too. So I don't know. Am I reading too much into that, Chad, or am I right on?
I think we're on the same page here. And I think that as we transition here into the complementary football discussion, which I think is probably the most important thing we need to talk about, that Kirk Ferentz sort of laid down the gauntlet in a way, saying like, there's a way we do things here, and the new offensive coordinator is going to have to do that. So any dreams about, here are the keys, offensive coordinator X, go do whatever you want. It's that part's not going to change. He's going to have to. That person is going to have to operate within certain parameters. And I'm glad Kirk Ferentz did clarify that. That was really good. I think that was your question. That was a really good question by you. And I don't disagree with it, but I do disagree with the notion that they have been playing complementary football the last 3 years, because they haven't been, because the offense is not doing its job. I mean, they weren't even protecting the ball this year, Scott. So I don't mind. What do you think about the complementary football part of this conversation? Because when it works, it does work, right? I mean, you can see it in the NFL all the time. Like, teams that protect the football generally win those games. And Iowa plays an NFL style where it's close in the fourth quarter and you got to win those games.
Stylistically, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, and you recruit and you coach to what your advantages and disadvantages are, and try to mitigate one and enhance the other. And in a place like Iowa, and we look at the recruiting class and talent acquisition, you can recruit 4-star offensive linemen better than you can 4-star wide receivers, and retain them and use them to your advantage. That makes perfect sense. Complementary football works when you can run the ball effectively, when you can complete passes on third down and move the chains and lengthen shorten the field, I guess, and, by your own possessions. But when you are number 2 in the country in yards per play allowed at 3.99, and number 1 is Penn State at 3.91, and you run 210 plays more than they do, then Phil Parker is a miracle worker. He doesn't deserve the Broyles. He deserves the Frank Broyles award, because there's no way you can do that year after year after year. And so to say it's complimentary, that's a compliment to Phil. That's not a compliment to your style of play and your team. So what they have to do is make the offense complementary of the defense, because if you can cut those plays down from, what's 810, and you're looking at 13 games. I don't know. I'm trying to do math in my head on the fly. Is not good, but if you can cut 15 plays off your defense per game, because your offense is scoring points, lengthening, adding to the time of possession, not turning the ball over, not making them, put out the fire, then I think you have a chance to win games against good teams. And we knew what the score was going to be, in the Big Ten championship, that they were more likely to get shut out than score double digits. And they got to rectify that, or it's going to be more of the same for the next few years.
Well, and to continue the Paul Christ conversation here, and marry that with the complementary football discussion. That's somebody that you can bring in, that you can trust, that's going to do that, because that's how he operated at Wisconsin. He understands that. And I think Ferentz even had a quote that I thought was really telling. He was like, I'm confident we're going to have a really good candidate that is going to be a really good fit here. And so again, I feel like those words really channeling towards Paul Chryst, who definitely for me is the betting favorite if you had a betting line right now. Not Joe Philbin, but that's something that doesn't mean it won't be Joe Philbin. But and then the other part of the Chryst thing is, he is at Texas right now. They are in the college football playoff. That timing, in a way, makes sense because Kirk wants to focus on the bowl game and winning the bowl game as much as possible. So he's going to extend that same latitude to whoever his next OC is, right? I mean, it's a much bigger game,
right?
Much bigger game. So, maybe if Texas loses to Washington, maybe we'll get more quick news. I don't know. Not that Paul Chryst has to stay there through the BCS title game, the national championship game.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if he did. So anyway, I think a Chryst hire would give Ferentz what he wants because Paul Chryst knows how to run the ball. I'm going to say he's probably a far better play caller than Brian Ferentz. No offense to Brian. He's got more history of it. And as we went over last week, when Paul Chryst gave up play calling, that's when Wisconsin's offense went south. Now they lost Jonathan Taylor to understand all that, but I just feel like it's that part of it, I think would be seamless. I don't think you'd have to worry about the complimentary thing that Kirk talked about.
Well, agreed. I mean, there's scoring points that matters too, and, we can be complimentary all we want, but 10-7 is not ideal. 38-7 is, or 6 or whatever, defense don't want to give up a touchdown, but I like, there's a lot to like there for Iowa, now I got into a disagreement with a couple of my colleagues on a podcast earlier this week because they want somebody more, they're looking at it from a global 20,000 point view, which Iowa needs to be more dynamic offensively. And this is just more of the same. And I'm like, there's really nothing wrong with the same as long as you have a better structure within that and better execution. And that's play calling, that's design, that's simplifying the passing game to me. I think it's just so complex that it's really hard for anybody to grasp. And if it's too complex and you're last in the country in offense, then it's probably time to make a change. And then and finally, but he can operate within these confines because he did it, and he did it organically. He did it himself. It wasn't because he was forced to do it. It wasn't because he was Brett Bielema as offensive coordinator, and therefore you do it this way. When he was the head coach, they coached this way. And Iowa also took major steps this year towards a Paul Chryst style of offense, which was operating the a lot of counters, a lot of gap blocking, man blocking, less zone, because their players fit that scheme better. So I think all things told, it would be fairly seamless. And even if he came back from the Citrus Bowl, which is the same day as the Sugar Bowl, which Texas is in, and let's say Texas wins and goes to the national title game, it's not like he has to come back and start scheming on January 3rd. The game's on January 8th, the championship game. He could come on January 10th, and you're not going to lose any ground against Troy or whoever you open with.
Exactly. Well, we mentioned holiday gifts earlier, so here's another one. 'Tis the season for libations, and a chance for you to do that if you haven't already given your friends at our friends at Steeple Ridge Bourbon a try. Steeple Ridge offers a high-quality, delicious drinking bourbon. If you don't find Steeple Ridge at your favorite retailer, ask for it by name. Steeple Ridge is distilled, aged, and bottled in Iowa by Lonely Oak Distillery. Let's get into some final thoughts on this offensive coordinator hire. I think the other thing that Kirk Ferentz said about this was kind of talked about, he looks at record as offensive coordinator, which we kind of got into. And, I think you look at Paul Chryst record at Wisconsin, 67-26. A lot of respect there. And I don't think, I think his age is almost perfect, late 50s.
Mhm.
If he wanted to, finish out his career here, probably could. If he wanted to launch himself into another job, hey, that's great. If he can revive the Iowa offense and make it, the college version of, say, the San Francisco 49ers, because that's really what we're talking about, right? A good tight end, a use of the fullback, a couple receivers, a great running back, good offensive line play, not necessarily a running quarterback. I mean, that's a hugely high bar, I realize, but like something like that,
Mhm.
it's obviously working in the NFL. It can definitely work in college. So I don't know. I just came away from Monday and then some of the reporting that I've done, like pretty encouraged that Iowa's going to get a strong offensive coordinator. And I feel like I'm seeing a lot of support for Chris out there, whereas I don't know if I would have seen as much before. I don't know. But I feel like people are kind of warming to the idea.
For the people that I've seen, and sometimes, maybe this isn't a fair judge, but on, say, Twitter, where people from the places where he's been and where he is have all been very complimentary. That includes Wisconsin fans that normally be like, "Ha ha, you're a sucker," but that's nothing like that here at all. They're all like, "Wow, that would be a really good fit." And then Texas, wow, he's been really good for the quarterback here, and including yours and stuff. And so even though he's an analyst, and but that's an important job, especially when your team's in the playoffs and you're trying to scheme for, in their case, Washington, and before that, Oklahoma State in the championship for the Big 12. And so I think overall he's respected. He's respected in the field, and what he did at Wisconsin, I would agree that it was probably time for a change. That things were getting a little bit stale there, and they wanted to go in a different, more vibrant direction. And it's different when you're talking about OC versus head coach. Head coach oversees the entire program, and that program had gotten a little bit sideways. That they had reached a level, and they were starting to backtrack a little bit, plateau wise, and whether that was his fault or not, it just was the reality of the situation, and they needed to change it. Whereas, as you pointed out last week and have before, that his play calling has been good and within this scheme, and Iowa doesn't need a lot of changing stylistically. It needs changing reorganization, is what I would say, offensively, to enhance a product that is not good. And but two other parts of the game are very good, elite level. So I don't know. I like it. If that's the case, I definitely like it, and I haven't heard anything negative, other than a few fans. But I think it's almost like Christmas. Sometimes you're disappointed even if you get what you want.
Right, because that's we didn't get any big shocking surprise.
Yeah.
Last thing here, Scott, on this topic is Brian Ferentz. This will be his last game, maybe. I mean, Kirk Ferentz left open the door that he, could, he wouldn't expect him to be with the team if he gets another job in the next week or so. Obviously, the team leaves Tuesday. It'd be hard to imagine him coming down with the team and then not finishing it out. But I don't know. I was curious. So there is a day next week where we're supposed to talk to the offensive and defensive coordinator. We haven't talked to Brian since August 13th, whatever day media day was. I don't think he's talked to anybody, has he?
Mm-hmm.
No. So he wasn't. He was the only assistant coach that didn't talk during the season. We were told we would get a chance to. We never did. Now, granted, he was dismissed, and you understand that.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, number one, do you think he coaches in the bowl game? Number two, do you think we'll actually hear from him? Number three, do we need to hear from him?
Yes, no, and I wish. Yeah, I think he coaches in the bowl game because, whereas if he gets a college job, that's one thing. But I think we've kind of all earmarked him for the pros, and that season doesn't end until January 7th, I think, is the last regular season game. So that's a week after the bowl game. So why would he leave? Because there are still jobs to be lined up there. So will we hear from him? No, I don't think we will, because
They do list coordinator.
They do. They list, but then they've changed that to like offensive coach.
I did notice that. I wasn't going to say anything. But
yeah. Defense. So I think we'll hear from Phil, and I think we'll hear from George Barnett. Is that likely? Or maybe they'll say, well, instead of the offensive coordinator, we'll have the special teams coordinator to talk about the new punter from Australia.
Yeah. Actually, that would be kind of interesting.
Yeah. So I guess we'll live with it. And then third, do we need to? I'd love to. I mean, I think either one of us, if Brian called either one of us up and said, hey, I want to talk, we'd both be going, yeah. Good story for us. Yay. And hopefully nobody else. Right. But we can be competitive in that environment. But no, but do we need to? I don't know. I mean, sometimes we do and sometimes we don't.
Yeah, I would like to, but I don't think it's necessary. I'm not going to feel like, why didn't he talk? That type of thing. And I don't know. I just get the sense he doesn't want to talk, which is, that's his prerogative. Yeah. I don't think Kirk's going to make him talk. So anyway.
Yeah.
This all morphs together. Signing day was yesterday. Obviously a kind of a backstory, Scott, to all this, but an important story because there is, a quarterback coming aboard. There's another quarterback coming aboard in 2025, yet no OC. Let's start there. What do you make of the quarterback position now? You get Marco Linez, James Rezar, and now Jimmy Football, right? Jimmy Sullivan, I think his name is from
Chitwood,
right. That's funny. So obviously they are comfortable with Iowa, right? And I do see a dual threat thing. Tyler Barnes' answer was like, we don't necessarily look at that. We look at mental aptitude, but I don't know. What do you think about quarterback coming in now? Like two brand new ones coming in, next year.
I don't know what to think, honestly, because it's such a, you've got a new offensive coordinator coming in, and with Cade McNamara still on the roster, and recovering from his ACL, I expect Cade to be the starter for whoever's there. And then I guess I look at quarterback a little differently than I did a few years ago. And that is, if let's say it's Paul Christ and he brings in Cade, he's working with Cade and he decides, I don't like what I have with these guys, or I need something more. You look at the portal right now, there's all kinds of players and quarterbacks that are in the portal. So in some ways, I think we'll wait and see. Now let's talk about James Rezar here. He is from Jacksonville, Florida, Bishop Kenny, just like Mike Mislinski. He's tall. He's got a big arm, some strength, and speed. That's the SEC speed is what we got now. 10.67 in the 100. Tyler said he expects him to be around 10.5 this year. That's something we haven't experienced at this position ever. Brad Banks was somewhat of a dual threat. CJ Beathard could run. Same thing with Jake Rudock, but I look at Rezar as something completely different. And, the back of my mind, I always wonder, is that where he's end up going to play? What happens if he comes here, and because he is, I think, a 54% completion percentage. If that doesn't improve, I mean, granted, he'd still be better than what Iowa had last year, but but maybe it's not his best position. So I don't know. And then as far as Jimmy Sullivan goes, I kind of look at it. It's 2 years down the road. We'll cross that bridge when he gets there. I wrote about it briefly, and then we'll see.
Sure. Well, I think the bigger, I guess, I was curious about what Tyler Barnes was going to say about the dual threat quarterbacks, because they have gone in that direction, but kind of said that wasn't intentional. I kind of wish it was intentional, honestly.
You're right.
But it, I guess it wasn't. So let's go to probably his most eye-opening comments, which was, I thought was just that he hasn't done anything in the transfer portal because he's re-recruiting the 6 guys. So as I kind of, first of all, I think that's a good plan because they're way over the number right now. So you can't bring anyone in anyway. But if you bring in 4 or 5 of those 6 guys, that's better than you can do in the portal.
Well, if you can get, let's say, Jay Higgins and Sebastian Castro, who's better in the portal than they are? at those positions? Nobody.
Right. Nobody. Yeah.
Nobody. So if you can get Jamari Harris, who I think of the bunch, like some of them I can see, like, okay, Higgins and Castro, you're going to be NFL draft picks. It's just a matter of, what's your upside. There is upside, unlike the question last year. Mm-hmm. But Jamari Harris, the upside is really important. I mean, I don't know that he would be much of a draft pick, maybe a 6th or 7th rounder, but that's not a real guarantee. I think if you're at Iowa with the best secondary coach in the world, which I think Phil Parker has that claim, you can learn one more year and go from being the guy opposite Cooper DeJean to maybe being a first team all Big Ten guy and going from being a 7th round draft pick to maybe a 2nd round draft pick. I do think that there's that possibility. So if the NIL is right, and it shouldn't be too high because he didn't have a lot of acclaim. You got to stay. I mean, this is your year to go from being a guy to the guy. So, and I talked to a few people with the program, Chad, and they seem to think that they got a really good chance to getting, say, 5 of them. They think they have a better chance of getting more back than one, or something. So, as long as it's the right guy, which is probably a Jay Higgins.
Well, and that's where, Tyler Barnes is a smart guy. I think I was lucky to have him. I would say that confidently. I know other bigger schools, name schools, have wanted him, and he stayed. I mean, his father-in-law is the head coach.
Yeah,
makes sense. But I don't think he would be putting all his eggs in this basket if he did not feel confident that they could get something done with a lot of these guys. Now, that doesn't mean, what if Iowa could even offer $1 million, let's say, to Cooper DeJean, I still don't know if the right thing for him to do would be to stay because a first round pick's going to get a guaranteed contract of something in the, 18 million over 4 years, something like that.
His bonus, he was like 18th. His bonus would be $8 million signing bonus.
Yeah. So the Cooper is in the Tyler Linderbaum, TJ Hawkinson basket of Iowa kid who loves Iowa, who may want to really stay, but eventually it feels like his, the smart decision personally is probably going to win out. Now it is a new world where, you could get paid to stay, unlike the previous guys, but of the 6, definitely the lowest percentage chance Cooper. I think the other 5 you're talking about, Luke Lachey, Jay Higgins, Sebastian Castro, Jamari Harris, Quinn Schulte, those guys all, I think, have a pretty good chance to come back. I don't want to get fans' hopes up too much, but I think it's on the table. And I think for me, honestly, I think Lachey is the top of my list, maybe even ahead of Higgins, just because you need guys on offense. And Ostrenga's fine, but if you could have him and Ostrenga next year, that's a really good starting point for the new OC. Absolutely.
I've always thought that if they could bring back one of these 2 tight ends, and Lachey to me is the better one. I think he is a healthy. Luke Lachey this year is probably a 2nd or 3rd team All-American and a Mackey finalist. Luke Lachey healthy next year wins the Mackey and could be a 1st round draft pick. I really think that highly of him. I think he's that good. And with this offense, with a new offensive coordinator, he's a piece you can play with. I mean, he had 10 catches in his first 2 games, and he was real pivotal in those games. So I think he would, he's a home run guy. I mean, he's a guy that, you give, if you're in NIL budgets, you give him the lion's share. And I think Jay Higgins and Castro are right there with him because they are the linchpins of this defense. If Jay Higgins comes back, and it was the right decision. Well, it's not for me to make, but if he does come back, he anchors an elite level defense once again. And if Sebastian Castro comes back, he is an All-American candidate next year for sure. And then Jamari Harris should come back. He's one that I would say should come back, even though he graduated. All the power to him. But Nick Jackson, somebody that they want to get a waiver for, and they're going to try. And if he comes back, then that's fantastic for him. But I think him and Quinn Schulte, I put it at a slightly different level. I hate to say, but that I think that they would be great. I mean, they were starters for a great team, but you put a priority on the others.
Yeah, I mean, even if you take DeJean out of the mix, if you bring back Higgins, Castro, Harris, Schulte, maybe even Jackson, probably a low chance there, but maybe if you bring all those guys back, man, you're starting to feel better about the offense already, because all you got to do is just be functional. And I feel like a Paul Christ, for example, or whoever else it is, offense can be better. You obviously need a quarterback too, but anyway, the rest of Tyler Barnes' comments, we should probably talk just a little bit about this class. I mean, they ranked kind of a top 30 class. I mean, I liked we always like to do a little section of what we're working on, and I thought you had a really smart idea. And Tyler even gave you a hat tip during the press conference about the core 4 of the 4 Iowa in-state kids who committed early, all with really, really good upside, I think, and probably would be bigger recruits if they were elsewhere. If they were Alabama or something, but so I want to give you the floor on the story you wrote there about those 4 guys.
Fantastic young men. I mean, first of all, they're all from within 60 miles of Iowa City. They all picked Iowa a year and a half in advance of this day. And so, kind of with recruiting and recruiting rankings, a lot of times it's out of sight, out of mind. And so when Cody Fox and Cam Buffington do it after their freshman year of high school and really are unwavering, even though Cody Fox still may be the best player in the state, he's going to fall because, somebody else in Western Iowa decided that they're wide open until after Thanksgiving of their senior year. I think people will realize very quickly who are the best players in this class, and it starts with those 4, at least in the state of Iowa, I should say. And when you look at Cam Buffington, and Tyler did mention his 40 times, and he later on said, he'd be a 4.5 star, and it's true. I mean, he's a sub 4.5 guy with explosiveness that we haven't really seen, with vertical, I think in the neighborhood of 41 or something. And then you look at Derek Weiskopf, that he was only one of the 4 that really looked at somebody else strongly, and that was Wisconsin. But, he's a high jump 6'9", just really an athletic specimen. And USC came after him late and tried to come with him. And he's like, forget it. No way. And then Preston Reese is a dead ringer in talking to him and for Josie Jewell, just kind of that guy that, it's like,
that's funny,
just intense, dark hair, farm kid, wears cowboy boots to football games. They showed me this picture and they wouldn't give it to me. But, when they were at the Dome and they did these team pictures and individual pictures, he's there with cowboy boots. And his mom was like horrified. It's like, why are you wearing your cowboy boots for this? But it's just kind of funny. But just his intensity and if he has more yards than any other player in state history because of offense and he's going to play linebacker and he looks the part. And then, Cody Fox, Notre Dame came at him. Buffington, Oklahoma came at him. And he's just like, let me just go to my little town. I just want to be here, just shut up, And that's just kind of the way these guys are. And that's why I call them the core 4, that unwavering. They had opportunities get poached, and they were right on. And they are going to be the foundation of this class. And then there are a couple others that I really, really like their potential, but I'll stop there and ask you what your initial thoughts are on this.
No, that's really great context. And I do feel like that when you get those guys early, they are forgotten and sometimes. And I think we were in the same conversation with one of the coaches that is really high on these guys.
Yeah.
So I feel good about that. Kind of the guy I'm really interested in, I've heard amazing things about, is Gavin Hoffman, the tight end from Kansas City. I don't know if that was on your list, but he's enrolling early. He's one of the guys enrolling early, so he'll be here in January. I feel like that could be I've heard the Lachey comp a little bit with him.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious how he turns out. I think he could be an X receiver, honestly, if they really wanted to. So I'm really high on him. I did a story on Brevin Dahl from my town here. I think he's going to be great. But I was really curious about Xavier Williams. You know, Tyler Barnes talking about how thick he was. Looks like an NFL back in the lower body, and Iowa doesn't really have that right now.
Yeah.
I like that. I like hearing that because I feel like they need that. And I imagine like a former Wisconsin head coach might like a big back like that too. You know, for that third and fourth quarter wear down the other team, 4-minute offense type deal. Who else is on your list, Scott?
Yeah, if there's a couple that I think that got overshadowed and we're going to know more about, maybe not this year, but in a couple of years, Joseph Anderson stands out most of all. Edge rusher from St. Louis, son of Benny Anderson, who played guard for the Baltimore Ravens in the early 2000s. He's 6'4", 6'5", 210, 215. As an edge rusher, he's, you'd think body type and build probably like Chauncey Golston coming in, but athletically, he's way, way, way beyond what Chauncey Golston is. I mean, he's an all-American triple jumper. Long jump is unreal. So that kind of explosiveness and bend from the outside, and then you throw him in with, a really underrated coach and Kelvin Bell, and then get him in the weight room with Ray Braithwaite. And in 2 years, you're going to go, whoa, what happened here? That's what my anticipation is for him. And the other one is, and this is kind of a unique one to me, is Jalen Watson, because here's a guy that was all Ohio as a receiver and really, his film just jumps off the charts. I mean, I think he's just really amazing. And yet he's going to play defensive back. And part of it is because of positional, that they already had their two guys at wide receiver, but part of it is that they anticipate him being a guy that can step in right away and can compete. And based on Iowa's past at that position, I think it's right on. So I like those two. I don't know enough about Dahl. I'm excited to get to know him. And then I think we'd be remiss if we didn't look at some of the offensive linemen, all three from the Chicagoland. You got two tackle prospects. You've got an interior prospects who's just a tough dog, guy, Josh Janowski, and it just sounds like a Chicagoan, and so Bodie McCaslin and Will Nolan, who is kind of a late bloomer, but really soared. This class is underrated, Chad, but I think I really like the pieces. They may not you may not know much about them next year, but in 2 years, you're going to know a lot about them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I know everybody loves their class or whatever, but I think this is a really good Iowa class, guys. They locked in early, nobody wavered, and then the last guy I'll mention is Reese Dakin, the punter. We got the Australian name, a name and a face to the unknown Australian. Tyler saying they've had him basically locked up for 4 months. Just committed, I guess, the other day or whatever, whenever LeVar went over there to make sure. But, the number one punter in the country, allegedly, is from the state of Iowa. And Iowa's like, we're good with this. We're good with this guy. So that tells me a lot about the punter.
Yes. That's the one that I think we're going to have to watch because Iowa will try to wrap up Iowans, and it should, especially kids who are from an hour away and grew up as Iowa fans. And so to say, no, we don't want Drew Miller, and he goes to Georgia, the two-time defending national champion. And then in your community there, that in central Iowa, you have Will Safras, who's going to Missouri. And, his mother is very instrumental in Count the Kicks. And, and to say, no, we're good there too. And to go to Australia, it tells me that, for one, they love that style of play, that it's really worked for them. But two, they have a lot of confidence in him. So he's got a lot to prove. I mean, not only coming off Torrey Taylor, is arguably the greatest punter Iowa's had, and that includes Reggie Roby, but also that you're willing to punt, pun intended, on two Division I prospects within your borders.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm glad you phrased it that way. Last thing we wanted to get to, Scott, good conversation on the signing day class. I know we both got pieces up. I wrote way too many words, so go check that out at hawkcentral.com. And I had Watson on there too as one of my picks. Tyler Barnes said unguardable as a receiver. So yeah, and if a guy can catch passes, he's going to catch interceptions too for Phil Parker.
But if he's unguardable, I almost would rather have him at receiver, to be honest.
I know. Yeah. He's going to be the put him on offense guy. 2 years from now.
That's all we need.
And then break his leg in practice.
Run a jet sweep.
Yeah. The Golden Gavel Award, Scott. This was something that you really spearheaded a couple of years ago, and as the Iowa media, we gave it out this week, and you gave it out more specifically yesterday. Why don't you talk about that? I'm curious to know how the experience was in presenting that to this year's very, very deserving winner, and maybe also give the folks who don't know what this award means.
Yeah, I think first, Chad, you and me and Rob and Hal and Tom Caker, we kind of discussed doing something like this back in the COVID era, kind of all the unrest that was going on. And we felt like, these young men with the football program and other sports too, but specific to football, deserve the opportunity. We appreciated them for what they were doing and how they conducted themselves, because they don't have to be, professional necessarily. They're not getting paid to do this, but they all are very respectful in how they present it. So we figured that this was a good way to honor them. And Duke Slater, at that point, we started to really think about him and what he represents to this program. And I'm glad now that they named the field after him. And, because, he was, at one point, the only black player in the NFL, and the owners tried to say, well, he's not black, he's Native American, which is because of their prejudice. And so we give him the Golden Gavel because he became a judge in Chicago afterwards. And so first year, Kayvon Merriweather, who really wowed us with a lot of just fun stories, but was a stand-up guy. Last year, you can't get any better than Spencer Petras and what he faced and how he dealt with everything in media. And some people have kind of said that, so you're giving it to somebody who's just nice to you or something. No, it really has nothing to do with how he treats us personally, but how he treats the opportunity to share his stories and to become a leader. And then Jay Higgins, Chad, I think it might have been week 2 or 3. I think you came up to me and he's like, it's Jay Higgins, and I'm like, yeah, there's nobody else that really fits that bill. I mean, even though guys like Joe Evans, would have been a perfect opportunity for him, or Nico, or a few others, but Mason Richmond. But I think Jay Higgins was just perfect for this award. I mean, stand-up guy, out there every time. I mean, you really had a nice tweet about it. What are your thoughts on Jay Higgins receiving this award?
Yeah, it was pretty unanimous among the Iowa media, right? Because you do all the voting, take all the votes, and I just appreciated how he would always talk, and he would never. What I like about him, in addition to the integrity that he brings to the interview process, and just he wasn't dancing around stuff. If you asked him something, he would give you a good answer. He wouldn't give you like everything, but he would just answer respectfully, and he would kind of understand our jobs as well. And that's kind of part of it. Like, he knows what we're trying to do. We're trying to understand, let's say, the next game better. And he'll walk you through why this team is good at whatever. And, what we need to be watching this week. And, and even the other day he was just great the other day, I felt like. And, I asked him, like, how did you stay healthy all year? And he's like, well, I wasn't really healthy, like finally kind of let his guard down. He said he got hurt in the Penn State game, and he's been battling through injury ever since. And I mean, that just speaks again to his character, because he was kind of like Jack Campbell in a way last year. Campbell would have been a deserving guy last year too, but just sort of like a guy that spoke well to represent the whole team. And I feel like that's part of the award as well. And he's just a really great guy too. It's not, you're right. It's not who's nice to us. It's kind of like that professional relationship, I guess you could say. So
it's about representing.
Yeah, right. It's not like there's a set criteria, like, oh, he came to 9 out of 11 availability. It's just like you kind of know it when that person is in front of you. And Jay Higgins was that guy for us this year.
He was a guy that was always requested because you knew you could count on him to tell you what the true story, and he wasn't going to belittle you. And one of the things that all of us ask dumb questions from time to time, and then some of us ask way more dumb questions than they should. But he doesn't belittle anybody for their questions or how vague or whatever they are. So I think that's admirable. He treats people right, professionally, again. And, I wouldn't have a problem. Somebody from a couple of fan bases really kind of lashed out about this, and I'm like, I think everybody should do this because, baseball's been doing it for generations. The good guy award is what they call it. And all we're doing is really saying thank you. Thank you for coming out, for talking, for telling, for being a good quote, but also representing the program in the manner that it needs to be represented. And Kirk Ferentz has given us, he's been very happy to have this award because, media is a part of their responsibility because they share their story. And to have somebody like Jay or Spencer last year, or if it would have been Jack Campbell or Sam Laporta last year, or if it had been Joe Evans this year, who there's part of me that always kind of feels bad because there's other people who have done such a great job, but Jay has been as great of a representative for that program that I've ever been around.
Yeah, well said. I think Evans was right. Would have been probably my second choice this year. Just he was terrific. So really appreciated him as well. Scott, going to Orlando. I'll be there. When do you get there?
27th. I'm 27th. So I'll miss the first opportunity. It looks like I'll be there probably an hour or two too late.
Okay. Well, we'll all be down there. We'll have another show, Legends and Listeners, I guess. From there, we'll figure out the details as we go here. But Merry Christmas to you, and I'll see you, I guess, in 5-6 days. Yeah,
Merry Christmas to you, Chad, and everybody listening. Thanks for tuning in, and hope 2024 brings us peace and happiness.
And maybe an 11th win for the Hawkeyes.
All
right. For Scott Dochterman, this is Chad Leistikow. Thanks for tuning in to Legends and Listeners from the Channel Seed Studios. Talk to you next week from Orlando, Florida on the Iowa Everywhere Network.